Okay, it's a pleasure to be with you all. As I said, I'm going to try to stick to the 15-minute time limit here. There's so much to say, but I'm going to go through the most important things. Of course, uh, we've already gotten so much excellent information and knowledge about this general phenomenon from the previous speakers. Really wonderful presentations. So I'm going to focus on what makes the active club scene in Sweden, particular and interesting. So this is a milieu that we've seen emerging slowly at first and then more rapidly in the past couple of years, but really starting in 2020 when we see the first groups that we associate with this milieu emerge out of the Swedish white supremacist scene. First, just some introductory remarks. As I mentioned, the Swedish, the first groups affiliated with this scene appeared on the scene already 2020, and there's evidence to suggest that the founding individuals and the main drivers of this scene have been inspired by Robert Rondo in the past several years and really have tried to apply his vision in the Swedish context. The active club milieu in Sweden in total includes some 100 something individuals that we have been able to identify. We do believe that it has the potential to attract many more individuals in the coming years, depending on how things develop. They are quite skilled at using TikTok and Telegram in particular for recruitment purposes. It also appears that the Swedish arm of the active club movement has established itself as perhaps the single most popular and successful branch in the transnational online space. What I mean by that is the Swedish groups have many more followers than equivalents from other countries. The Swedish group's propaganda is being frequently posted and shared and appreciated in these online spaces and so on. And I think as a general point, this is in line with how Swedish right-wing extremists and white supremacists are relatively skilled and relatively successful in producing propaganda. It has to do with their general the English language skills of the general Swedish population, which the right-wing extremists also have and which they exploit in terms of reaching out to the rest of the transnational movement. And they just tend to be good at media production and propaganda production in general. So they appear to have established a leading role in propaganda production. They're also transnationally networked with various transnational sort of umbrella online groups for this scene. One thing to note about the Swedish active club scene is that about half of the individuals that we've been able to identify have a background in the Nordic resistance movement, which today the group has a pronounced rivalry with. And this rivalry is something that unfortunately is driving the threat profile, I would say, growing the threat profile of the active club movement, because this rivalry, this spirit of competition that has arisen between the NRM and the active clubs is, as it seems, driving hate crimes and violent behavior on the part of both. We feel that this is a growing public security threat, which, as I say, has to do with the active rivalry with the NRM. And with the political developments in Sweden, where white supremacist ideology and far-right ideas are being normalized and mainstreamed at an alarming rate, which is something the security services and our security agencies are also pointing to as driving a terrorist threat from the right-wing extremist scene. And there are indications that the milieu is radicalizing only in the past year, in line with the general active club philosophy and strategy of trying to, as Dr. Ritzman was saying, to try to avoid law enforcement. They do not claim all of the violence that its members are responsible for. There have been a number of high-profile attacks, apparently by right-wing extremist perpetrators in the past months, where there is, I would say, reason to suspect that active club people may have been behind, although police investigations are still ongoing, so it's too early to say. In this brief presentation, and I'll try to keep track of time, of course, there won't be time to cover all of the ground and everything there is to say about the scene. So please make use of the Q&A to ask about anything that I didn't have time to address. And please do contact us at Expo here in Sweden, in Stockholm, if you want to know more. This research is only an example of the type of monitoring and analysis that we do every day, not just on this part of the right-wing extremist movement, but on all parts. So please do contact us if there's anything we can help with. Okay, so just some background and context then for the Swedish white supremacy milieu. Since 2014, the Nordic resistance movement became this militant, openly neo-Nazi revolutionary group, although operating within existing as a legal association in Sweden, which is very permissive in this regard, legally, constitutionally. This violent right-wing extremist group, neo-Nazi group, started to dominate the right-wing extremist space very, very significantly. But since 2019, since a failed election run and various other problems and a major split of the NRM, they have been in serious decline and their hegemony has been broken. They still are responsible for the majority of actual outward-facing activities and activism carried out by right-wing extremists in Sweden, but they are a shadow of their former selves at the moment, although it's too soon to say that they are on their way out. But they are in a state of decline, and this has opened up a space for those right-wing extremists who in the past several years, in the shadow of the NRM, in the periphery of the movements or in the margins of the movement, have been advocating for more decentralized and informal kinds of organizing that are free of the rigorous sort of bureaucratic structure of groups like the NRM and traditional organizations like the NRM. They've been championing organizational forms such as Männerbunde, like free associations, freestanding groups of men, smaller groups, local groups, who are acting as some kind of organizing themselves as some kind of shadow militia to be mobilized for specific purposes. It is also the case that over a period of years, which more than just the past few years, but over time, recruitment and propaganda dissemination has become far easier for right-wing extremists in Sweden because of platforms like Telegram and TikTok that are virtually unmoderated as far as right-wing extremism is concerned, at least in Sweden. And as I say, because of the normalization of far-right ideology as a result of the political developments in Sweden, where we do have a radical right party right in the middle of Swedish governance and policy who are partnering with the current government. So this is something of the background and context for the current developments. So before the formal active clubs started appearing, we have had groups emerge that we call sponsors, if you will, in an informal way, of the active clubs. They are forerunners and sponsors that have laid the groundwork for the emergence of formal active clubs in the past couple of years. Membership in these groups is fluid. Many members are organized in parallel in other groups. They've played a kind of mentoring role. They are, generally speaking, older, these individuals. I will talk about their ages later, give you data on that. They laid the groundwork for the active clubs by sort of advocating for that organizational model, disseminating those ideas, and organizing conferences and boot camps and gatherings, basically where they have encouraged a new generation of right-wing extremists to take up this new model of active clubs. The most important group in this sponsor cluster is Gym 14, which casts itself and functions in reality as the hub of the active club milieu. At least it has thus far. It is located in a town that has a Hammerskins presence. The person behind it, Ludwig Delin, who I showed a picture of earlier, our reporting at Expo shows that he has been active in Hammerskins, but he's also been active in many other Swedish white supremacist groups, the Party of the Swedes, a neo-Nazi party. He's been involved with the Nordic resistance movement and various other groups. And he has a very clear vision that is in line with the vision of Robert Rondo, and he has played a major role in organizing Gym 14 and by extension organizing the active club scene. Then there are a couple of other groups. They're not terribly important in themselves. They're not terribly interesting in themselves. I do mention them here because we do see them as part of the active club milieu, but as part of this old guard and groups, forerunner groups that have been there since the beginning and whose members have joined the new active clubs when they started appearing. So we have the group Två Saxe, which was founded in 2022. We have Vigridsvallen, another right-wing extremist group where basically the idea is to socialize, to get together, to study far-right material together, to hang out, to just maintain social cohesion. Notably here, the individual Anton Thulin, who is a specially designated global terrorist, according to the United States State Department, has been active and has had a prominent role in this organization. He, of course, remains at large and remains, as far as we know, active in the white supremacist scene. Of course, he was designated a couple of years ago by the US because of his continued activity in the white supremacist scene after his conviction, along with a couple of other individuals, for a series of terror bombings in Sweden that happened right after these individuals had gone to Russia and trained at a paramilitary camp run by the Russian Imperial Movement, or rather by its paramilitary wing. Yeah, trying to keep track of time here. Hans, let me know if I'm running over time. And then we have Granskogsfolket, which is sometimes mentioned, by researchers looking at the white supremacist scene in Sweden. But important to understand here is that Granskogsfolket is not an independent organization. Rather, it has morphed into the active clubs. Its members have gone into the active clubs, and it now exists more as a side project of people within the active clubs. The network structure can be said to consist mainly of what we call the sponsor groups and what we call the primary tier of active clubs, which is really only two organizations that have a steady degree of cohesion and a steady stream of activities that we can actually record and document. There have been other smaller groups or initiatives that have called themselves active clubs, that have set up accounts, but have since more or less gone dark or gone silent or inactive. These include active clubs in the regions of Skåne, Småland, Södermanland, and Östergötland. But I would like to stress that these groups are not really to be considered actually existing groups at the moment, but they have popped up during the period that we're talking about. The same is true of a number of hang-around, if you will, clusters of individuals who have expressed an interest in forming active club groups, who have maybe appeared when the major groups have organized some kind of national get-together or national boot camp. But again, these are just signs that there is interest across the country among many individuals for joining or for appreciating these active club groups. But when we're talking about the active club scene in Sweden as it exists today, we're really talking about the sponsor groups and Aktivklubb Hälsingland and White Boys Stockholm, which are the steadily existing, continuously existing active clubs so far. There is an e-commerce organization called Asgard Brand that furnishes the scene with merchandise that the groups themselves sort of advertise for when they do their activities. This appears to be function as a kind of commercial auxiliary, if you will, of the scene. Last year, on National Day, there was founded a national umbrella group called Active Club Sweden. This is not an independent organization. It is an umbrella organization in which Aktivklubb Hälsingland and White Boys Stockholm are taking part, and which has its own account, its own logo, and so on, and probably does want to effectively gather the entire scene under its own umbrella. But it's more of a federation or confederation, if you will, of groups. It might also be mentioned that the Swedish active club scene has apparently helped to inspire the active clubs in Norway and Denmark. For example, the Active Club Norway, when they were founded, they thanked their Swedish comrades for the help and inspiration. It was founded shortly after Gym 14 organized a national boot camp. Danish active clubs appear to be organized and driven mainly by an individual who previously was a part of Active Club Skåne, which is one of the groupuscules that no longer is active today. Moving swiftly on, I'm going to talk about the number of activities carried out by groups in the scene. A comparison here shows you that while the active clubs and sponsors together carried out 176 activities that we were able to identify in the year 2023, that number is still dwarfed by the number of activities carried out by the NRM, even as weakened and as declined as it is. You have another couple of groups there for comparison: the White Nationalist Political Party Alternative for Sweden, and a small meta-political white supremacist community cultural center type group called the Free Sweden. If we break down, however, these numbers into proportions, into types of activities, we see that the active clubs and the sponsorships groups, the active club scene, is significantly more oriented towards combat training and close quarters combat training activities than the NRM, which, however, the NRM has also increased that ratio significantly from previous years, in part as a result of the competition that they are sensing coming from the active clubs. So the entire scene is being shifted overall towards being oriented more towards combat training as a result of the very strong focus that the active clubs have on this. It's, I think, significant to mention that the majority of active club activities in 2023, for example, have taken place in municipal buildings such as school, physical education halls, or public wrestling halls, something that probably would not have happened if the municipalities had had knowledge of these groups and known who they were, granting permission to. But they did not. Knowledge of right-wing extremism in general is very low among Swedish public officials. Strangely, I think, at this point, but that is the case. So they're often able to exploit public facilities in this sense. And the rest is mainly taking place in gyms that are controlled or operated or owned by members of the network. In this graph, we see that the sponsor groups are in no way obsolete. After having seeded, funded, encouraged the active clubs, they are still active in themselves. The vast majority of those activities are carried out by Gym 14, which is run by Ludwig Delin. Even though they lost their gym and their locale in 2023, the municipality there managed to buy up the property and then dismantle it for, I think, building code violations, something like that. But Gym 14 remains active, and it remains a significant actor in the active club scene. So data on the activists that we've been able to identify: the age range of the members of the active clubs proper is from 19 to 26. The average age is 22. The median age is 21. The members of the sponsor groups, as you can see, are slightly older. The average age here is 38. The median age is 34. So this is, somewhat of a previous generation, more experienced. They have a longer background in these in the scene.
Morgan, slowly but surely, we have to come to the conclusion.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so very briefly, there is some overlap with the martial arts and MMA scene, but there's also some friction there from the established actors in that scene who don't want these extremists there necessarily. Same thing is true of the soccer hooligan scene. I'm going to talk a little bit very quickly here about the data on the activists, again, of the Swedish active clubs. As you can see, they're all male. There are no women involved. Most of them have a prior history in the right-wing extremist scene. About half, slightly more than half, have a background in the NRM. Some of them have a criminal record, and more than 20% of them got their first criminal conviction after joining the active clubs. So there is a sense in which this milieu is a criminally active milieu. Just then to conclude very briefly, as I said, we consider this a growing public security threat. Last year, they were very aggressive, targeting the LGBTQ plus milieu and the Pride movement during the Pride season. We expect them to do the same thing this year. This is something that we hope the Swedish authorities are taking very seriously, because it's almost guaranteed that they will try to harass, intimidate, perhaps even attack people. As I said, we have seen a number of high-profile attacks, violent attacks lately that we suspect that people in the active club scene might be involved in. And you know, it's not strange that a scene that is so focused on violence and building its violence capital, and which has this philosophy, which Alexander so illuminatingly discussed earlier, that they would move from just practicing violence and talking about it to actually staging attacks. So this is a new type of phenomenon from the Swedish perspective. It will require new types of preventive work, new types of intelligence work, and new types of operative work from police, security agencies, and preventing violence agencies in Sweden. Yes, thank you.